Hi, welcome back to the channel. It's nearly Christmas. That means the Christmas jumpers are in full force. Eat more fruit and vegetables. Merry Christmas. In this video, what I'm actually going to talk about are my plans for next year, how I'm planning this space, and a few New Year's resolutions. I think all gardeners need gardening resolutions for the new growing season, don't they? So let's go and get ourselves in the polytunnel, get comfy, and we can sit and discuss how I am planning the space for next year. I'm sitting in the polytunnel now. Weather is glorious. The sun is shining outside. Got the Christmas hat on. It really is time to start planning this garden for next year. I'm a new grower, so I need to have some organisation to keep track of what I'm doing, especially in the first few years. I mean, I'm a planner anyway, so I'll probably always like to plan things, but especially this first growing season, to just help me keep track of what's ready, when to sow, when I need to plant it. Now, there's loads of different ways that you can do planning, and a lot of people go for the online veg plot programs. There's quite a few of them about. I'll link some in the description. Just offhand, I can't think of them. But I did look at one program and I found it quite difficult for me to make the plan of my plot because it is L-shaped. And I wanted to be able to see what was going on inside the polytunnel bed, to plan that through the months as well. So I didn't really want to be sat at a computer. I wanted to have my plan to hand. So when I changed something while I was out here, that I could sort of instantly make that change on my plan. So I've decided to go for this kind of plan. I'll hold it closer to the screen. And this plan, I've got one for each month of the year. Now, what we did was we took a drone image of the plot, or rather my husband did, and put that into Photoshop and actually traced around each bed. So this is an accurate representation of the plot. And yes, it does include showing how off straight the fruit cage and the beds underneath them are, that sort of have to follow the line of the fruit cage. We did think about straightening that up in Photoshop, but we thought that it was actually quite funny to look at it. So on this plan, we have been very careful to mark out which way south is. Not that I'm likely to forget, but it does just help in your mind when you're planning. And the months I've put in the corner here, so that when you flick the page quickly, if you want to look at March or, May or whatever, it's not at the top of the page, it's in this corner, so that I can quickly reference to the page that I want to do. Because the fruit cage is permanently planted and the asparagus bed is permanent, we already have everything that's in the fruit cage printed out on every month. There's just no point in keep writing that in every month. We've sorted that: the grapevine, the raspberries, blueberries, the gooseberries, blackcurrant, and the strawberries, and then the 3 fruit trees are marked out here too. And I've just labelled these 2 beds as herb beds because that is the plan for those anyway. There's nothing on this plan, but I do have things planted. So I'll just go ahead and show you how I plan on filling this in. So for instance, I know that the 3rd bed out there has a row of broad beans at the top. So my plan is to just write in there broad beans. Half red and white onions. In this bed I have garlic and shallots. If we come along to the polytunnel, I know that I have carrots here. I have calabrese. I've gone ahead and filled all of that in now. So you can see obviously lettuces, chicory, moving up to the mustard greens that you've seen, alpine lettuces, the broccoli rabe, that basil that I keep trying to grow over winter. So everything is set there for what's in the tunnel now, or what's on the plot now, should I say, for December. So how am I going to use this plan? Well, as I've said, I have one printed off for every month. And I have this section that says sow, plant, harvest and clear. I'm not actually listing what I've got in the main garden at the moment. I won't be growing in there in the way that I have been for this season. So I'm focusing on this plot really for the plant. So let's just propose that I want to put at the end of May in the polytunnel my tomatoes. So I know that this centre bed I want filling with tomatoes. So I go down to May on my list and I'm going to write in there tomatoes. I'm going to plant tomatoes out in May. Obviously there'll probably be stuff to harvest there, but we're focusing on tomatoes for the moment. Now, in order to have those ready to plant out in May, I need to sow them first. So I am going to go on my list for February. I'm going to write tomatoes for sowing, and I'm going to write it again in March as well, tomatoes. To help me in my organisation, I am going to go through my seed boxes. I'm going to start looking at the sowing dates, and then I'm going to start listing them here for when it's recommending me to sow them. So for instance, Royal Chanteray say to sow March to June. So obviously I'm going to succession sow. So I'm going to head down to March here, February, March, and I'm going to write sow carrots, and I'm also going to write them in the bottom half of the month, carrots, and I'll do that every month then. Obviously this is a process that you repeat for everything that you plan on sowing throughout the season. I'm just giving you a very simplified example, but for me I'm hoping that that means I'm going to be able to instantly come out. I like a visual thing more than reading a long list, and I can just come out and go, right, it's February, sow tomatoes. I'm going to draw a line across for things that I'll do in the first half of the month and the second half of the month as well. So I'm using a pencil so that any mistakes you make, easy to rub out. You know, when those slugs eat your crops, just pretend it never happened. Rub them out, they were never in there. That's my plan anyway. I'm hoping that that is going to help me, and it's quite a simple process. This can be left in the polytunnel, hung up in the shed. I can take it with me back into the house, but it's just that I can just literally have it here, and if I've sown something, I can mark it down, and I just find that much easier than when I get back into the house to then have to log on to the computer, and I might forget what I've done, and I might end up making a list to take in the house to put on the computer. So for me, I'd rather just have it in this paper form. I think this will prove invaluable for me to help me keep track of the plot next season. So, talking about things for next year, got a little list here of gardening resolutions for next year. I've had to make a list already so that I don't forget my own resolutions. That's great, isn't it? So number one on my list is label seedlings. And to label them with things that are UV fast and water fast as well, because I marked things up last year and it either faded in the sun or it washed off, or I didn't put enough information on when I first started out. Later during the season, I actually got a bit more wise to that and did put the dates that I'd sowed things, and did start listing some of the varieties that I was sowing on the actual labels as well. My biggest mistake was the first thing that I planted were seed potatoes, and all I put on my labels were first, seconds and main crops. And whilst at the time I thought that was quite handy, I can't remember what varieties that they were anyway, so that was one thing. When I started earthing up the potatoes, I'd also unwittingly covered the labels, so I had absolutely no idea which were the first earlies or the second earlies. I knew which were the main crops because they were in different type of buckets, but I had no idea which were which. So yeah, definitely being more organised there in labelling, and especially when I've got lots of things to sow next year, I really need to make sure to be hot on with the labelling. Another one of my resolutions for next year is to succession sow, and to be really proactive about succession sowing, because I wasn't this year. I was in so much excitement to get things sown that I just sowed everything all at the same time. So we had 12 broccolis ready all at the same time. Succession sowing, I think, is the key next year, especially for things like carrots and the lettuces. I need to make sure that I have a continual crop of those things coming. I had about 60 radishes that were all ready at the same time, and everyone got a little bit fed up of radishes, really. So succession sowing is number 2 on my list. Third resolution is to be making more of an effort for compost. Next year will be my first full season. So I am obviously on a back foot because I haven't had a full season of things to grow to put in a compost bin anyway. And this is a large plot. I'm going to need a lot of compost. And I could have been making compost earlier though. We have access to plenty of manure, straw bedding, all sorts. You know, I could have been making compost almost from the off. So that is another big resolution. Number 3 is to be hot on with making compost. And then I guess the 4th resolution sort of ties in everything really. It probably should be number 1, is to simply be more organised. It's a big growing space, and so that I don't become overwhelmed by it, I need to just be organised, keep on top of the weeding, the watering, the sowing, the planting, the thinning, the tidying of leaves, the harvesting. I just need to be on board with everything. That leads me to my 5th resolution, which is actually not to miss the harvest. And I think to understand that things grow sometimes or finish ready to harvest sometimes quicker than you expect. And you can look at something one day and think, oh, it's nowhere near ready, and then not really pay much attention to it for 4 or 5 days. And then it's, especially in the case of things like broccoli, it's gone to flower. So yeah, I need to be more sort of aware, keep checking on things that are approaching harvest and not miss the harvests, because I did do that and I wasted stuff. I mean, it's gone back into the compost, but you know, I'm growing it to eat it, not to make more compost. And then my last resolution, number 6, is stop buying seeds. I absolutely have thousands of seeds. I must have about 6,000 carrot seeds at the moment. I'm not going to plant 6,000 carrots next year. Obviously, there are some different varieties, but even so, there is a limit, isn't there? So yeah, stop buying seeds. I don't think I need to buy any seeds at all next year. One final resolution is to accept that failure is part and parcel of growing your own fruit and veg, especially when we're all doing it organically. Every crop is not going to reach full harvest, so make sure you plant extra and don't expect to plant one thing and that to work, because it's just not going to happen like that. Not for everything anyway. You'll be lucky for some things, but not for everything. So yeah, accept the failures and don't sort of dwell on them too much and get disheartened by them, and enjoy the successes, because obviously they are going to happen as well. There's not a lot left to say really, but what are your resolutions? Drop me a comment. Have you got any specific resolutions, things that you want to do differently that you've done this year, trying something new? I've got lots of things I'm trying new, so I can't say, oh, I'm so excited to be growing such and such next year, because I'm excited to grow everything. It's all new to me. That said, I am really excited for the glut of cucumbers. I didn't have that this year. I got given 2 plants. One of them produced 1 cucumber and the other 4. And I could kick myself because I did have time to have a late sowing for cucumbers really, but I didn't think I did at the time, so I didn't bother. I'm also growing melons. Can't wait for that. And I'm going to try growing loofahs. I was quite blown away that loofah was something that we grew. I know it's a natural product, but I don't think I quite realised exactly what a loofah was. So I'm going to try and grow some loofahs next year. So I'm wondering if any of you watching would like to grow loofahs as well. If you want to join me in a little grow along, I'll find the variety of loofah that I'm going to grow. And if you want to get some seeds, and we can have a little grow along, and you can send me some pictures and just see if any of us manage to get loofahs. We've just hit 800 subscribers on the channel as well, which honestly blows my mind. Thank you to each and every one of you. The content is a little bit thin on the ground at the moment because, well, crops are thin on the ground at the moment. But thank you for joining me in this journey, and I'm hoping that sort of this time next year, when we've gone through a full season together, we'll have learned lots, made lots of mistakes, had lots of successes too. But I'm hoping to continue to build this community on YouTube with like-minded gardeners, and there's some genuine friendships that are starting to form. I just want to say thank you for every interaction on videos. I really welcome them. Sometimes the negative comments, they're okay too, you know, everyone has an opinion. And I can't wait to start growing in this space next year. I'm going to end this video now anyway, and I'll catch you in the next one. Look after yourselves. Bye. Final position check of an envelope. Very high tech this is.
Think I bought enough chilies?
Thought, do you know what, it's quite funny that you are along. Oh no, Claire, that's final position check.